Track wrestling here in Tempe, Arizona, in the office of Arizona State Athletic Director Ray Anderson. First of all, Ray, thank you so much for taking some time for us today. Greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure. Glad to have you on campus.
Well, I think one of the things, we were talking a little bit off camera, and one of the things that I think is really interesting is we do our 7 Minutes series, and we've talked to, I think, like 53 college All-Americans now, and one of the things that's really struck me in those conversations with the Arizona State guys is they said one of the reasons they picked Arizona State was the administration. And I found that really unique. What kind of things are you guys doing as an administrative staff to emphasize Olympic sports, and what and why?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think our actions support the fact that we support Olympic sports vigorously and wholeheartedly. When I came here 4 years ago, now going on 5, I made it very clear to my boss, President Crow, that I wanted to come to a place that wasn't just a football and basketball school, but in fact was dedicated wholeheartedly to all the Olympic sports and wanted to be elite across the board. So what we've done is actually taken action to actually demonstrate our belief in that. Zeke Jones is our wrestling coach, Olympic status. Bob Bowman is our swimming and diving coach that we've brought in, Olympic status. Cliff English is our women's triathlon coach who we brought in, Olympic status, and it goes on. So I think what we've done is to demonstrate by our actions as well as by our messaging to our student athletes and their parents when they're considering ASU that Olympic sports to us is critically important. We're in the Pac-12 and we call ourselves the Conference of Champions, and there are a whole bunch of Olympic sports in the Pac-12. We want to be up there with anybody in terms of the number of Olympic sport offerings. Wrestling critically important to us, and that's one of the first coaching hires I made when I got here was to bring in Zeke Jones from where? The U.S. Olympic Committee, freestyle wrestling coach, a former ASU great. And so we determined that if we were going to do it and really message, we had to do it by our actions. And it's gratifying to know that our student athletes have noticed, they have taken the message, and we're proud that they're actually talking about it publicly.
Yeah, one of the things I think that's really fascinating about Arizona State right now is not just what's going on with wrestling, but you guys, since you've been on board, have gone from 22 varsity sports up to 26, and that hasn't been the norm across the country. It seems like numbers are declining, and it's been that way for a long time. How have you been able to add on at this point?
Well, we've made a determination that the student-athlete experience is one of the best experiences in terms of leadership development you can provide anywhere, and certainly at the collegiate level. So we've determined that as the largest public university in the country, to the extent that we can financially, fiscally, responsibly make the case, we're going to continue to add sports. We're not really handcuffed by what others aren't doing, aren't capable of doing, maybe don't have the will to do. So since I came here in 2014, we've added 4 varsity sports. We've elevated men's hockey, we've added women's lacrosse, we've added women's triathlon, and we reinstated men's tennis after a 10-year takeaway. So what we've determined is that as long as we can figure out financially how to support them, we're going to continue to add sports because we really believe in the student-athlete experience and additional Olympic sports. We just think it's the right place to do it. It's the right thing to do because we're not just doing it for ASU. We want to help feed our national teams, our Olympic teams, and that's something that we're prideful of and believe that our student body and our fans deserve as many varsity athletic experiences as we can reasonably and financially provide.
It's got to take some pretty aggressive fundraising, I would think.
I am doing probably more fundraising than I anticipated coming in, but that's exactly what you have to do because we're not in a state, we're not in an environment where you're just getting money from the state. And so you have to have a very good development team that's willing to go out and really hustle, if you will, and articulate and get people excited about the overall mission here. So we spend a lot of time fundraising and developing, and fortunately people buy into the vision of how important the student-athlete experience is in those Olympic sports, like wrestling. We've got a lot of folks who are excited about Zeke Jones and ASU wrestling, and the young student athletes that we brought in here, like Tanner and Zahid and Ryan and many others, that we're getting support, and we're going to continue to seek their support, and we're not shy about asking them to support what really is, we think, a great and a targeted mission of being elite across the board.
What made Zeke a good fit for you?
The fact that he's passionate, he wants to build a program that gets ASU back to a national championship caliber. He was an alumni here. He was a successful collegiate Olympian, and he loves Arizona State. More importantly, he loves the student-athlete experience, and he wants to win. And he wants to win championships at the highest level. So that passion and that culture fit with Zeke was instant when I met him. I knew he was the guy. And he has done nothing but over-deliver, very frankly. He's tenacious, he's determined, and he's a really good ambassador for everything about wrestling in ASU.
One of the things that struck me in reading some of the past stories that have been written about you, you said we need to develop Olympians, or we need to have Olympians, which I think is a pretty unique perspective. You're not thinking about just the 4 years or 5 years that they're here on campus, but beyond. What do you think that does for Arizona State when you have athletes competing at the highest level internationally?
Well, there's no questioning. It's additional great experience for the student athlete. But also it's great branding for the university, for the conference, for amateur athletics. And I just happen to believe very much so in amateur athletics and the Olympics and the international games. And I think for us to be able to, frankly, be a very effective feeder system to their international teams, it makes you feel good that you're not just helping ASU, you're helping your country. You're helping your Olympic federations, and I think that's a good thing. Most importantly, you're expanding and advancing the experience of the student athlete to get out there and do something beyond just the borders of ASU. And you put all those things together, Andy, and I just think it's a wonderful experience and an obligation for us as part of our leadership development business, and that's what we're in. We're in the leadership development business, and we happen to think that the academic and the athletic competition at the highest level, you put those together and you're going to get some great leaders coming out of that. And so with the Olympic sports, it's not just the 4 or 5 years here. It's representing your country like you're seeing now in the Winter Olympics. It's amazing to see how the U.S. Olympic teams are populated by collegians who have done really well here. You put all that together, it's the right thing to do.
Construction going on all around here, right behind you, massive renovation of Sun Devil Stadium. News here in the last couple weeks that you guys are going to be constructing a new arena for Arizona State wrestling. We'll be competing in there. What went into that? How did you get that done? And what are you most looking forward to about having that complete?
Well, the multi-purpose arena will house wrestling, gymnastics, and ice hockey. It will also be a part-time venue for women's volleyball. They'll play in both the larger arena, the basketball, and with smaller matches be in the smaller arena that we're building. And then it will be accessible for student use and public use and esports. You name all the things that a 4,000 or 5,000 seat arena could accommodate. But we've done that because we have articulated that we have this vision of really expanding and promoting our Olympic sports. And in terms of facilities, you want your student athletes and you want your fans in really nice facilities. And we've needed upgrades, so it's time. So we go out and fundraise. We go out and put the case together and get support from the university to help us with the bond and the other financing mechanisms to get it done. And so we just figure it out holistically. And because we're not an athletic department standing alone, but in fact we are part of the university and we have a president who understands the value of athletics, we get a lot of support from campus that maybe some others don't get in this day and age, in this environment, in this economic times that we're getting here at ASU, and we're very grateful for. But we work, man. we get out there and we hustle and we articulate the vision and mission, and then we can't be shy about asking for philanthropic contributions to help us get to where we want to go, and we just go do it.
What do you see for the future of college wrestling 10, 20 years from now, and more specifically Pac-12 wrestling and wrestling in this region of the country?
We're trying to do our parts to keep, get it back, advance it. It's just a tremendous, tremendous sport. They've been doing it for hundreds and hundreds of years, not thousands. And when you see wrestling and you're able to actually be up close and understand the hard work, the dedication, and the skills, and by the way, it's men and women who wrestle. And when you get a chance to really appreciate how much goes into being successful and elite, it's a really beautiful sport, very frankly. So we want to do our part to advance it 5, 10, 15, 20, way long after I'm gone from the athletic director's chair. We hope to have left a message here at ASU that wrestling is critically important. We want it to be big-time sport in the Pac-12 and certainly here for decades to come.
You mentioned men and women. Is women's wrestling something that's on your radar as a possibility at Arizona State in the near future?
Anything that is potentially going to be an emerging sport, we want to support, because we want to give opportunities to expand the student-athlete experience across all sports that people are interested in. And so to the extent that women's wrestling becomes an emerging sport, we're going to do everything we can at ASU to support that movement, just like we have with triathlon, just like we've done with beach sand volleyball. If there is a new opportunity for student athletes to compete at the varsity level, we want to be part of making that happen.
You know, we were talking off camera about your men's tennis program, and you know, for the wrestling fans that are familiar with the story, 10 years ago Arizona State wrestling was dropped for, I think, what, couple weeks maybe. Same with swimming and men's tennis, and you were able to salvage wrestling and men's swimming. As you mentioned earlier, you brought back men's tennis. It's been pretty incredible, the amount of progress you guys have made in a short period of time.
Well, thank you. We appreciate the compliments. We've worked hard, and 10 years ago, I think it was, during the economic downturn, there was a potential move to eliminate wrestling here, which is just, the thought to me is appalling. Fortunately, you had folks like Art Martori step up, talk to the president, and determine that could not happen here at ASU. And so he mustered the support to keep men's wrestling. We had the same response with men's swimming and diving. There were folks who stepped forward. There was not anyone to save tennis back then. So I was delighted. We were delighted 2 years ago to reinstate men's tennis. We went out and got the financing necessary, very frankly, including a sizable contribution from myself and my wife, Buffy. All that's public, so I'm not telling you anything I shouldn't. And then we got our apparel partner, new apparel partner at the time, Adidas, to step up with several $1 million. We put it all together, and we have men's tennis back. Those Olympic sports should never be at risk anymore at ASU, as far as I'm concerned, and certainly not during our watch will we see sports go away. That I promise you, or I won't be here.
What are your thoughts when you see a program go away elsewhere?
It's sad because as a student athlete myself, I played baseball and football in college. That experience is just life-changing. And so to see those opportunities go away for young men and women, particularly those who get pulled during the middle, say for instance, of their experience, I just think it's sad. I think it's a disservice. And it's sad. I understand some of the realities, but I think people just need to figure a way to work harder to save or maintain those programs. And so it's very disheartening to me when I see that happen.
I think your story is pretty unique in itself. Age of 9, you decided you wanted to be a lawyer and kind of live out your father's dream, right?
Yeah.
And then you know, you move on. You mentioned your career as a college athlete, but you get into the NFL, and you know, a lengthy period of time there where you're in the NFL. How did you wind up in this job?
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate you doing your due diligence. Yes, I was at 9 years old. I knew I was going to be a lawyer once I lost my dad, who wanted to be a lawyer. In any event, I spent time after law school as an agent, a representative for players and coaches, including college coaches, and then after being an agent for football players, baseball players, head coaches at college and in the NFL. I went to the Atlanta Falcons for 4 years, did the front office thing, then went to the league office for 8 years as the executive vice president of football operations, and ran a lot of things, including discipline and college relations and the competition committee and officiating, etc. But some of my favorite times, the times that I felt like were most productive for me, is when I was on the college campus. Either around my coaches, recruiting back when I was an agent, doing orientation, doing transition, a symposium for schools, making the transition from college to the pro level. I just enjoyed the college experience so much. So when the opportunity was presented to interview for this position as the athletic director, particularly when I got a chance to do my due diligence and learn about Dr. Michael Crow and what he had done and what his vision was for Arizona State, I determined that I needed to come and talk to Dr. Crow, and I'm glad I did, and that led me here.
I understand Dr. Crow's got a wrestling background, right?
He does indeed, wrestling, and he threw the javelin in college. He wrestled in high school, heavyweight, I might add, and we'll tell you that was some of the most enjoyable and I think educational time in his life in terms of who he was, how to compete. He really loves wrestling. And very frankly, I anticipate that he will join me this year at the NCAA Wrestling Championships in Cleveland.
You mentioned, we talked a little bit about some of your hires that you've made and high-profile hires across the board. You mentioned getting Zeke from USA Wrestling and Bob Bowman. What kind of characteristics do you look for in a coach?
Passion, absolute passion, and the love for their sport. And I also look for characteristics to say this person wants to build a program. They want to put their stamp on their work and do it in a way that has purpose. And so I look for those are things I look for in every, not just every coach, but in every person that I'm interviewing to potentially join our team, join our family of ASU, very frankly, join our culture. So passion, real love for the sport, love for teaching, love for the student-athlete experience, and very frankly, then wanting to put their mark on something that hopefully will differentiate them from the others who are doing what they're doing.
Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, recent NCAA bids came up this past year, and the tournament's going to Pittsburgh in 2019, Minneapolis 2020, Detroit 2021, and then St. Louis 2022. How much of a factor was Phoenix in that? Did you guys submit a bid, and is that part of your vision at all going forward to get the tournament down in this region of the country?
Well, unequivocally, that would be part of our desires going forward. We did not bid for this latest round, but the Phoenix, Scottsdale, Tempe, this area, I think has proven in many instances that we know how to hold and put on fabulous major sporting events. Super Bowl, college football championships, all-star games, Final Fours, the Phoenix Waste Management Open golf tournament, PGA Tour, largest event, and other things. So I am bound and determined we are, as a institution, to help host an NCAA wrestling championship here in the next few years. It's a wonderful place. People love coming here. There's wrestling, I think, affinity here that would support such a bid. So there's no question that at some point in the near future, Arizona State, the city of Phoenix, city of Tempe, city of Scottsdale, this whole area will be looking to welcome wrestling fans, NCAA wrestling fans, into the desert.
One other thing, we talked a little bit about your background in wrestling. You said that you wrestled a little bit as part of for football, right? I mean, that it was part of your workouts for football?
Indeed. In high school, part of our conditioning for football was to get on the wrestling mat quite regularly. And so I really enjoyed that. And then, you know, everybody wrestled back then, at least in our neighborhood, in the 6th, 7th, 8th grade, just as part of your recreation. And so that's where I got to appreciate wrestling as a sport that took some dedication, took some strength, took some stamina, took some guts. And so I didn't wrestle at a technically sound level, but certainly as a high schooler, wrestling as part of conditioning was a part of what we did, and just loved it.
You mentioned that you're going to be going to Cleveland. Your plans are to go to Cleveland to watch Sun Devils out there. Zeke was telling me that you flew up to watch the duel last year on the road at Stanford for the conference dual title.
I did.
Your wife is going this weekend for the Pac-12 championships, right?
Yeah, up at Oregon State. Corvallis, my wife Buffy, just loves the wrestling, loves it as a sport. So she will be traveling up there representing Sun Devil Athletics along with other administrators. We have a big softball tournament down here. Well, I should say a baseball series here, as well as a big women's basketball game that I have to stay back for. But the Anderson family will be represented at the Pac-12 championships this weekend by my wife Buffy, and then but I'll be going to the NCAA championships in Cleveland, hopefully along with President Dr. Crow, who is tentatively scheduled to join me.
Well, great stuff. Thanks so much for giving us some time, Ray.
My pleasure.